Hello, and welcome to Turkish Film's Daily Chess Analysis, Episode 15. Today we are analyzing the game that I played today, and it was an Anti-Nimzo East Indian. Normally, so I'll play the first few moves, they're all fine, and I've reached this position a few times, but often it goes d4, that's not d4, it goes d4, and after knight f6, c4, e6, the East Indian defense, I play knight f3. So it's the same position, just by transposition. This is considered the anti-Nimzo because normally in this position, white plays knight c3, and the bishop lands here, and it's a pin, and this is the Nimzo Indian. And I played this for a while as white. Actually, if you watched the previous video, I'm kind of recapping. But I didn't like some of the lines that black seemed to have too easy a time equalizing, in my opinion, because that theory that I'd come up with against the Nimzo from the black perspective, it just seemed sort of very straightforward. So I stopped playing it as white and started playing the anti-Nimzo, knight f3, hoping for maybe a d5 and a g3 to get into some Catalan things. He played bishop e7, which I hadn't seen before. I'm actually kind of surprised that it says that it's a good move. In this position, a lot of people play d5. It makes a lot of sense, staking your claim in the center and keeping white on his toes about where this bishop's going to go. I've also seen bishop b4, and after bishop d2, the bishop often returns to e7 because the bishop isn't actually very comfortable here. So to show that line, after this, the bishop will often go back. Also what happens is queen e7, which defends. And in a game that I played in my first tournament, a5, defending this bishop. Okay, and that would be the Bogo Indian, where he makes this check whether or not your knight's on c3. In our game, however, he played bishop e7, and I continue with my plan g3 and bishop g2. I didn't want to play knight to c3 because I thought he can maybe play this anyway, and while I have an extra tempo, I'm not sure that's going to be enough. Also, I didn't really remember how to play exactly correctly a tempo up against the Nimzo. He played knight c6. I expected d5, bishop g2, totally normal, d5, and castles. So now I'm just treating this like a Catalan, where he's already put his bishop and knight here. dc4, and I wanted to go ahead and take that pawn back, so I did. After knight a5, here's the first inaccuracy that I made. I was deciding where to put the queen, and attacking the knight didn't really make a lot of sense because he can play c6 or b6, both of which would be moves I think he'd be fine and happy making. Maybe b6 is better as opposed to c6, although b6 does open the diagonal for some quick attacks against his rook. So I decided to drop my queen back. Actually, just after this move, or two moves later, I asked myself, where does my opponent want to put his pieces? Which is a really important question when you're playing chess, because if you just focus on your own pieces, then sometimes your opponent gets he gets his pieces on really good squares. And so here I had to notice that black has a really strong pawn in the c-pawn, and that pushing the c-pawn is actually a very good move. And so by playing queen c2 instead of queen d3, I'm actually keeping c5 kind of at bay for now. Also, I'm still accomplishing my goals of defending e4 so I can push the e4 pawn and stopping the knight, from entering. So c2 is just an improvement over queen to d3. He played h6, which was very mysterious to me. And I played e4 when I should have brought my knight out. I'm just expanding too early. I need my knights to help back up my queen. He played knight c6, which I was kind of happy to see him blocking in his pawn. Also, he had kind of a funky knight journey. So now I played knight c3. I should have played a3 to stop his pieces from landing here. I just didn't see that as a huge... I didn't see the value in this move so much because I thought this is a minority. I don't really need to push these two pawns if he has 3 here. But basically I need to be taking away important squares for his pieces to converge upon. And it doesn't harm my position. And another thing that I've been hearing a lot, the Grandmasters, basically, my opponent doesn't really seem to have a great move. Like, there's no move that he's really just dying to make. And so that kind of allows me to make these moves. This isn't necessarily a slow move, but it doesn't have a threat with it. It's not developing one of my pieces. It's just stopping his moves. and saying, okay, it's your move, now pick something. And so maybe he'll have to do something committal, like trying to do, this to fianchetto his bishop. But then again, he's just opening up the diagonal for my bishop. So a3 would have been better than knight c3. Knight b4, great move. I played queen c4, attacking the knight. a6, attack the knight, retreat my queen, and he goes back. And here I was pretty happy, right? Because I have all my pieces. Like, my bishop can come into, great squares if it needs to. My rook can come to the center. I feel pretty harmonious here with my 2 pawns in the center versus his 1. Where his bishop seems like it still has some problems, and my bishop doesn't suffer the same fate. So here I thought, we should push up in the center, because we have, slightly more development, slightly more active. Bishop b7, and I push through d5. And here's my first big error of the game. This is actually a blunder. It goes from me being +2, almost +3, to being just kind of equal. And the reason is basically I'm not a huge fan of trading pieces in this position. And if I had recognized that my pieces are just a lot better, that this knight has a lot more potential than that knight, this knight doesn't really have a lot of good squares, then I think I would have more easily seen e5. And that with e5, I can still take this pawn. He has to move his knight somewhere, and I'll take this guy. But instead I traded pieces, which is just against kind of everything the position is asking of me. He played knight a5, as a square he wanted his knight on anyway, to come back in the game, maybe to push the pawn, but also to unleash the bishop. And here I played queen to e1, which I was actually quite happy with. Computer wants me to play queen c2. I can show that variation. I was worried about the pawn. The computer wasn't. It was like, oh, he's not gonna take it or whatever. But basically, yeah, I was making some moves just to see what my threat is. Basically, my pieces just end up on good squares, and d6 comes eventually. And it's pretty harmful because I can take here first. And he can't move because taking here and then moving my knight would be a check and winning the queen. So I played queen e1, attacking his undefended knight and keeping an eye on this bishop. He kind of fell into the trap. He took the bishop, and so I took the piece. I don't want to say trap. It was just basic. I was attacking his knight and he didn't see it. We trade queens because I'm up material. And the rest of the game isn't very interesting. I'm just up a piece here. He also thought that this bishop was hanging, and we traded. So lessons for this game aren't too numerous. One, because it's a very short game, but also it's pretty much just ended by a blunder by him. My blunder's pretty bad too. And so I've been thinking today about how do I see when my pieces are better than his pieces. And in this case, basically, if I look, instead of just, oh, I can capture, let's do it. If I look at e5, now why would I look at e5? Well, I want to liberate my bishop, and I can do it with an attack, and I can still take the pawn. So it avoids trading pieces, and it makes my pieces better. So if I slow down and don't just capture back immediately, but look at how to improve the position to the maximum, I think I would find e5. So my problem wasn't going slow enough and being precise enough. I just captured pretty much right away. I'm fine with queen e1. I don't really care about that. And I had one more mistake here. Queen d3 instead of c2. And that's just me not seeing what his move is. His move is to utilize the c pawn. And I didn't really acknowledge that, and so he was able to... He could have had much better chances by using it, but he ended up not using it. So that's just me limiting my options for no reason. So, sorry, this is kind of a short video. I played 93.9. My opponent played 82.7%. You can see here, it's almost that perfect smooth curve we want to see with this, this big dip thrown in there. After I blundered, he returned the favor, with interest, right? I dropped out at 2.76. He returned to me at 3.79. So very generous of our opponent there. It was kind of a rough game, but we were never in trouble. All right, sorry for the short episode, but there's just not a lot to say about this game, really. Other than, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that you stay Turkish, and I hope you have a good night. Good night.